At 19, she was sent untouched and alone to the giant who lived in the high country. What he did next left the whole town speechless. The stagecoach lurched and then stopped hard, a cloud of dust curling through the thin, cold air. Nora stepped down carefully, boots crunching on the rough stones of Briar Ridge, a small frontier settlement tucked against the endless wilds of Montana. She owned almost nothing, just a little trunk and a letter folded flat inside her coat. This was supposed to be the start of something new. Her uncle's letter from back east had been short and blunt. You'll be looked after. He's a mountain man. Hard hands, steady spirit. A fit match for a girl with no options. No warmth. No kind closing. Just orders. Since her parents died, Nora had been handed from one relative to another like a stray parcel. Until this, an arranged marriage she never chose. Still, she held tight to the one thing she could. Maybe this meant safety. Maybe it meant finally belonging somewhere. She looked around. The town was a handful of slanted wooden buildings leaning against the hillside, as if tired of standing. People paused to stare. Murmurs slipped between them, quick, quiet, curious. A girl traveling alone always turned heads, especially one who didn't fit the place. Nora waited on the boardwalk, pulling her coat tighter. 10 minutes. 20. The man she was meant to wed. She knew only the name, Mr. Harlan Tate, didn't show. At last the shopkeeper came out, apron dusty, hands wiped on the cloth. You the girl for Tate? He asked. Yes, Nora answered. Trying to keep her voice level though her chest felt cold. Nora Calhoun. The shopkeeper's expression fell. You'd best step inside, miss. In the dry goods store, the smell of tobacco, flour, and leather sat heavy in the air. There, the man told her. Harlan Tate was dead, killed in a hunting accident nearly 3 weeks back. No one wrote, he said, awkward. Didn't know he was expecting a wife. Nora didn't speak. Her fingers tightened around the letter, inside her pocket. She had crossed states and miles for this. For nothing. When she stepped outside again, the townsfolk watched like she was a show. Some faces softened. Others turned sharp. What's a girl like you doing alone? A voice called. She spun around. A man leaned on a saloon post, grinned too wide, beneath a grimy hat, teeth crooked. I'm waiting for someone, she said quickly, easing away. Someone who ain't coming, he said, pushing off the post and stepping toward her. Figure you need a warm room tonight. I got one. Nora backed up, heart thudding. Nobody moved to help, until a shadow slid in between them. The grinning man stiffened and looked up, then up again. Logan McGraw. He was huge, broad shoulders, long frame, thick beard, eyes flat and hard as rock. He didn't say a word. He didn't lift a hand. He simply stood there, quiet as stone, and looked. The other man muttered, didn't mean no trouble, and slipped away. Nora turned to the stranger, who had stepped in front of her like a wall. Thank you, she said in a small voice. He dipped his head once and started to leave. Wait, she called. Did you know Harlan Tate? He paused. When he answered, his voice was low and rough, like gravel dragged across wood. Hunted with him, sometimes. Do you know where I could stay? She asked, swallowing. Just until I figure out what to do. He studied her for a long, quiet moment. Then, I've got space. But it's on the mountain. Nora glanced at the staring faces, the half-smiles, the whispers that followed her. The mountain sounds fine, she said. He didn't smile. He only waited while she lifted her trunk. Without another word, they started up the trail, climbing toward a place that, though neither knew it yet, would change both their lives. By the time the sun fell low and painted the valley gold, Logan had already hitched his patient mule to a little supply cart behind the general store. Nora stood close by, small satchel clutched in her hands, still unsure whether to speak. You coming? Logan asked, voice rubbed smooth by rain and wind. You're not the man I was supposed to marry," she said. "No," he answered. "I was his neighbor. Knew Harlan for years. He told me about bringing a wife out. Said you were on your way. Then he got sick." Nora lowered her eyes to the dust on her shoe. "He never said he had a friend like you." "Most don't," Logan replied, the hint of a joke in his words though his face didn't show it. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. Logan didn't throw her easy comfort. He only said, "Come up the mountain. I've got a second cot. It ain't a home, but it's dry." "Why would you help me?" she asked. He looked up at the ridge, standing dark against the fading sky. "Because nobody else will. And I wouldn't leave a dog in clear water overnight." The climb was steep and bit with cold. The track twisted like a snake through dark pines and over thin bridges that creaked. Glacial streams flashed silver under the last light, edges crusted with ice. The mule cart groaned as it rolled. Logan walked beside it, quiet except for a few short warnings. "Mind your footing. Hold tight." Stars pricked the sky by the time they reached his cabin. The building was rough-hewn but sturdy, pine logs stacked with care, tin roof slanted for snow. A single lantern moved warm light across the shutters. Logan opened the door. "Not much," he said. To Nora, it looked like a place pulled from a storybook. Antlers hung by the window. Dried herbs swung above the hearth. Neatly folded pelts rested by a small iron stove. Everything was in order. Plates stacked clean, kindling bucket full near the door, a simple cot with a wool blanket in one corner, and across the room another cot made up with its own blanket, and a folded flannel shirt laid on top. "That one's yours," Logan said. "You can change behind the canvas screen." Nora walked in slow, fingertips touching the cool wooden beams. "You live here alone?" He nodded. "Just me and the mountain." He bent to feed logs into the stove. Nora sat on the edge of her cot and let the heat settle into her hands. Her head buzzed with questions she was too worn out to ask. The night came in sharp and cold, and the wind rose and cried around the cabin like something hunting the eaves. Sometime deep in the night, a sound pulled her from sleep, a long, far-off call that lifted the hair on her arms. She slipped from her blanket, bare feet on the rug, heart rattling. At the window, shadows slid between the trees. The cry came again. "Wolves." She stepped back. Panic climbed her throat. Her breaths came fast and shallow. She turned toward the door, just as Logan filled the frame, quiet as always, blocking the draft like a tree trunk. He didn't need to ask. He saw the fear in her face. "They won't come close," he said, calm and even. "Not with fire going." "What if they do?" she whispered. He walked to the stove and tapped the embers to life until orange licked the iron. "They don't bother me." "How can you sleep through that?" she asked. "I sleep light." "I don't feel safe," she admitted, voice cracking. He moved slowly, careful, and sat down on a stool a few feet away from her cot. He lifted the long rifle from where it leaned and rested it across his lap. "I sleep with this," he said, "and I don't point it at what's inside my cabin." She stared. "My gun always points out, never in." The words fell gentle as snow, but heavy enough to settle her chest. She drew the blanket around her shoulders and sat back on the cot. Her breathing began to ease. Logan gave a single small nod and stood. "Going outside a bit," he said. "Would needs chopping." He left, boots crunching on frost. Nora watched the door, and for the first time that long day, her heart slowed. Something about this mountain man, the quiet, the steadiness, felt more true than any promise in the letter she had clutched for so many miles. She didn't sleep much, but she didn't think of running. The days that followed, Nora watched Logan the way you study a flame trying to stand in the wind. The forest had its secrets, and so did he. She didn't think she would ever know all of them, but she wanted to learn what she could. She began doing small things to make the cabin less like a shed and more like a life. In a tin can by the window, she pressed wildflower seeds into dirt and turned the can to catch the light. She stitched the tear in his shirt sleeve with slow, careful hands. She baked cornbread on the stove, and the warm smell filled the cramped room. She swept the hearth and lined up his tools. Logan often stood in the doorway, tall and dark against the dim, saying little. But his pale green eyes followed every movement she made. One evening she found a kettle with a cracked seam. She tried to fix it with resin and wire, but her hands fumbled. He stepped behind her, rested a hand on her shoulder for the briefest moment, and set a spare kettle beside her, without a word. Later, when she stoked the fire near midnight, she noticed a small wooden stool placed next to her cot. Before, there had been only one chair by his, and by morning, a mug of hot water waited where she always sat. None of it was loud or grand, just little kindnesses, like snowflakes that melt but still leave the ground softer. A gray afternoon slid toward evening, when a rider from town came up the trail and stopped to the cabin. He handed Nora a folded letter. "Town says you should answer," he told her. "They require it." Then he turned and rode off. Fear and curiosity knotted together in her stomach as she broke the seal. The note came from the Women's Benevolent Society of Clearwater. Neat, tight writing accused her of living in open shame by staying unmarried in a man's home. It ordered her to return to her patrons back east. It warned she had 6 days to appear before the society or be publicly scolded. Nora's breath snagged. Paper shook between her fingers. Logan looked up from sharpening an axe head, face unreadable. After a long pause, he stood, walked over, and took the letter. He crumpled it in one hand. "They got no right," he said, voice low and hot. "You won't answer them." "What if they force me?" she asked. He turned, jaw set like rock. "Lach ing try. I'll protect you." For a heartbeat she saw more than cold anger. She saw a fire that burned clean, not wild. He dropped the wad of paper to the floor and stepped over it. "I'm going into town tomorrow," he said at the door. "I'll make it clear you're under my protection. Don't go anywhere till then." "Logan," she said, reaching out, her voice shaking. He glanced back, the hard line around his eyes loosening. "Rest," he told her softly. "Let them come. I'll show them another kind of strength." That night Nora lay awake, listening to the wind drag its fingers through the pines, trying to find stillness under the noise. Across the room, Logan sat with his head bent, awake as well. The cabin held both their breaths. Over the next days, courage grew inside her like a seed pushing through cold earth. She kept tending the tiny seedlings on the sill, even when nights were freezing. She mended extra shirts. She cooked when Logan forgot to eat at the right time. She learned to carry water from a creek without spilling and to split kindling, slowly, clumsy at first, but willing. Logan watched. When he saw her fighting the coal shovel, he walked in, took it from her, and adjusted her grip with gentle hands. When he noticed his chair had been moved nearer the fire, he nudged it a little closer, still so heat would reach where she sat. Neither mentioned the letter. It lay silent between them like a stone in a river that water must flow around. On the morning before he planned to walk into town, Logan stopped her at the door. "Stay," he said. "No need for you to step into their talk." "I can't hide while you stand up for me," she answered, shaking her head. "I'm going too." He held her gaze, then placed his hand lightly on her sleeve. The touch said more than speaking. "All right," he said. "We go together." He offered his arm. She slipped her hand through and held on. They stepped out as one, into a day they could not predict, toward people who liked to judge from benches and pews and windows. Dawn broke pale and thin. Frost clung to the cabin's glass. Embers in the hearth glowed like sleepy eyes. Nora sat on her cot, fingers laced, heart tight with words she hadn't said. Across the room, Logan stirred. Sunlight cut slanted lines across the pine walls. Nora cleared her throat. "Logan, there's something you ought to know," she said. He waited. "I was never meant to be a true bride," she admitted, eyes dropping to her hands. "My uncle arranged the marriage with a mountain man I'd never met. It was his way of unloading me. My parents died when I was 15. He didn't want the wait." She swallowed. "When I came, I thought someone would claim me, would welcome me. Instead, I found no one." Logan said nothing, but his stillness held room for her words. "My father back east was a judge," she went on. "He sentenced a man named Marcus Tate, who swore revenge. After they hanged him, his brother came for us. He burned our farm, hurt neighbors, made the whole town afraid. We fled, changed our name, moved west. The man who died here, Harlan, was tied to them." She paused. "So when my uncle pushed me toward a marriage for safety, I agreed out of fear. But he died before I arrived. I put my trust in a letter and found only betrayal." Logan took a slow breath and looked toward the window. "I lost my family a long time ago," he said quietly. "Fought in border skirmishes. My brother died in a raid. My parents too. House burned to the ground. I carried a rifle and headed west to forget names that hurt to say." "You never told me," she said softly. "You hardly speak about anything before now." "Because pain talks enough by itself," he replied. "I wanted silence. But when I saw you standing alone in a strange place, I knew that fear." Dust hung in a bright beam near the door like tiny stars. Nora touched the edge of her sleeve, then looked up at him. "I know your past now," Logan said, stepping closer. "I know what you lost. And I understand you didn't come for love. You came for shelter. But I promise, here you won't lose yourself again." Her breath came sharp, heart beating faster. The space between them didn't feel so far. That afternoon he said, "We should go to town. You deserve to face them, to show them who you are." Nora hesitated. The words from the Women's Society still pricked like thorns. But she nodded. When they reached the hall, it was half full. People from the town sat stiff and still. The ladies of the society wore hard faces and tight mouths. A stern matron rose as they entered. Logan guided Nora to the front. He cleared his throat. The room settled. Even the air seemed to wait. "My name's Logan McGra," he said. "I don't have a lawful claim on this woman, but my conscience claims her now. If anyone thinks she's living wrong, they can speak to me. She's under my roof. I shelter her. I'll speak for her." His words carried clean to the back wall. Women shifted in their chairs. Men looked down at their boots. The matron opened her mouth, then closed it again. The town judge didn't say a thing. Nora's throat tightened. Logan stood tall beside her, calm and steady, like a gate that wouldn't swing open in a storm. Murmurs rolled across the room, but no one stood against him. Something changed, quiet and real. The weight of their judgment thinned. Outside, the sky had pulled a lid of cloud over the ridge. Nora looked up at Logan. "Why did you do that?" she asked. He touched her shoulder. "Because you deserve to hear your name spoken without shame. Because you shouldn't wear blame that belongs to others. Because I trust you." Tears pricked and slid before she could stop them. She turned her face away and let them fall. He did not rush her. He only matched her step as they left the hall and walked back toward the mountain path. The ridge didn't feel as lonely anymore. That night she lay awake thinking about the silence he had broken for her. Outside, the wind moaned over the trees. Inside, his heartbeat was slow and even a promise without words. Dark pressed close to the cabin. The fire nipped and cracked, throwing small shadows into the corners. Nora sat against the warm log wall, knees tucked up, inches from Logan. Coyotes called far away. Their voices faded into the cold. Inside, the quiet felt larger than speech. She thought about all the small moments that had collected like pebbles in a jar, each one simple by itself. But together, they made something she couldn't ignore. It wasn't fear that sped her pulse when he drew near now. It was gratitude, mixed with something deeper that had no name yet. Logan shifted, poked the coals. Orange flared and fell. He glanced at her. "Nora," he said, voice low. She looked up. "I never asked you to stay," he went on. "You don't owe me anything." She shook her head. "I'm staying not because you rescued me, but because of how you live. Because when others looked past me, you saw me and still gave me space. Because you don't demand. Because, in your quiet, you tell the truth." His jaw tightened a shade. He turned to the fire. "You're better than me," he muttered. "You should have an easier life than this, a farm, a friendly town, folks who know your name and care." He stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair, then looked back at her. "I worry I'm not worthy. My past, these mountains, the scars I carry, none of it is gentle. You don't deserve to bear it." She set a light hand on his arm. "Don't say that." "If you want to leave," he said, voice gone rough, "if this life feels too hard, I won't hold you. I'll walk you down tomorrow. You can go to that society, live how they like, do what they expect. No shame. No fight." Her eyes filled. She could see the fear he wouldn't speak, fear of losing her, fear of saying he cared and hearing no answer back. She stood, took a tiny step closer. "You'd walk me down just to let me go?" she asked. He nodded, eyes dark. "To set you free." She stepped right in front of him, the firelight catching in her hair. She laid her hand over his chest, feeling his heartbeat under worn fabric. "I won't go," she said, clear and steady. Her fingers trembled, but her voice didn't. "This isn't only a shelter for me anymore. This is where I choose to be." He stared, breath caught between yes and no, longing and doubt flickering in his pale eyes. She held his gaze and didn't look away. "I won't run again," she whispered. "I'll stand beside you not from pity, not because I must, but because of how you live each day." He closed his eyes and breathed in. The room seemed to shift lighter. He reached and brought her close. She rested her head against him, the warmth of him deeper than the fire's heat. He bent and spoke into her hair. "You're braver than me." "Maybe," she said, lifting her face to see him. "But love asks for courage, doesn't it?" He nodded, voice thick. "It does." The wind pressed against the cabin. Inside, two hearts found the same rhythm. She had chosen. He had accepted. In the soft flicker of firelight, they held on to each other, stronger for it, and ready for whatever might come. Morning smelled like sawdust. Day after day, Logan rose before sunrise, lifted his axe, and went to work. Where there had been only a clearing, long timbers now stacked into lines and angles. It wasn't just a building going up. It was a promise made of wood and work. Nora watched him shape each beam with patient strength. He didn't waste words, but she could see care in the way he smoothed rough edges and measured a window frame not once, but 3 times. "You're building it for me?" she asked one morning, voice small but hopeful. He kept his eyes on the timber. "For us," he said. Bit by bit, the outline of a real home appeared. 4 firm walls, a sound roof, a window set right above where he planned the table, so light would fall over her hands when she read or sewed. On a quiet afternoon, he carved her initials inside the doorframe, hidden where no one else would notice, but exactly where his hand would pass each time he walked in or out. She didn't need grand gifts. This was more than enough. News trickled down to town. The silent mountain man was building a house for the girl folks had once judged. Whispers started again, but they sounded different now. The blacksmith, who used to grumble about wild men and wilder girls, sent up a small keg of nails. The baker's wife wrapped flour in brown paper and tied it with string. Even the mayor tipped his hat when he saw them pass. "That man's done more with quiet than most do with speeches," someone muttered at the store. Nora planted little herb starts along the new sill, lavender, thyme, rosemary. Sparrows tucked a nest under the eave. A red ribbon fluttered from the porch beam like a small flag of hope. One afternoon Logan came in with curls of wood on his shoulders, holding a small box he had carved. He put it in her hands without a speech. Inside lay two simple rings, plain wooden bands. One larger, sanded smooth. The other slim, with a tiny mountain flower carved at the center. "Thought maybe," he said rough-voiced. "If you still want, we could say the words." Tears warmed her eyes. She nodded before she could speak. Plans began. Not for a church or a town square, but for the same mountain that had taken her in and kept her safe. The people, once wary, brought what they could. A seamstress hemmed a plain, white dress. A stable boy carried up a bundle of wildflowers he'd gathered from the meadow. There wasn't a preacher yet, but one would come. By evening, Nora sat on the step of their not-quite-finished home, watching Logan hang the last shutter. She looked at the neat porch, the little herb bed, the window where morning light would spill. This was not only shelter. It was a home made by hands marked by war and wilderness, shaped by a love so steady it didn't need to shout. Soon, right here, they would promise to stay, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. The wedding morning came clear and bright. The sky was soft blue, brushed with light. Up the slope above the cabin, where wildflowers burst in too many colors to count, a small group gathered. No banners, no fiddle tune, only the air, the grass, and a low, warm buzz of voices. Nora stood at the edge of the clearing. She wore the white gown she stitched herself, simple and careful, each seam a piece of the life she had claimed. Her hair lay in one long braid over her shoulder, tucked with sprigs of lavender. Her bouquet was a handful of mountain blooms, no two the same. As she stepped forward, the clearing quieted. The old blacksmith dipped his chin. The baker's wife pressed both hands to her chest and smiled. Even the sheriff gave a small nod. His usual scowl eased. Logan waited at the center, newly shaved, wearing his best shirt. His boots were dusty, his hands still slightly rough, but his shoulders were straight. When his eyes found Nora, his breath caught. The preacher, a traveling man with sun-browned skin and kind eyes, began. "Marriage isn't the joining of perfect people," he said, voice steady. "It's two souls choosing day after day to stay, because of their cracks, not in spite of them." A light wind moved the grass. Pine scent drifted through the flowers. "If anyone objects," the preacher said, "speak now." No one did. Only a respectful hush answered. Logan turned to Nora. Before anyone could tell him what came next, he lowered to one knee. He took her hand, the small, strong hand that had learned to sew, cook, carry water, and keep going. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "These," he said, voice thick, "are the strongest hands I know." Nora's eyes shimmered. She lifted him with a gentle tug. "I do," she said simply. He smiled. "I do." The preacher spoke the words that made it true. Husband and wife. The moment hung soft and golden, like honey on a spoon. Logan caught Nora up, not to show off, but because it felt right and real. "Logan," she laughed, startled, arms around his shoulders. "Thought I might steal one dance," he murmured. There wasn't any music, but someone began to hum. The blacksmith's young daughter clapped a slow beat. A few more voices joined. In the middle of wildflowers and rough chairs and gentle smiles, Logan and Nora waltzed. It wasn't smooth. His boot nicked her hem. She laughed so hard her eyes watered. He spun too big. She turned too fast. But it was theirs. Children wove between chairs. Neighbors clapped along. The sheriff leaned on a fence post and smiled before he realized it. The sun slid lower, tipping the world with gold. On that quiet ridge, where once there had been only silence, now there was something else. A circle of people, a little celebration, and a lot of heart. As Logan drew Nora close, her head rested on his shoulder. His cheek brushed her hair. They didn't need to say a word. The mountain had given them peace. The rest they had given each other. If this story touched you, if it made you smile or reminded you that even in the roughest places, love can take root, tap that like button and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories. We bring you tales of grit, tenderness, and quiet courage from the frontier, where love isn't simple, but it's always worth it. Stick with us for more stories where the wind carries secrets, hearts speak louder than voices, and even the hardest lives find a way home. Thanks for riding along. And remember, out here in the West, every love story leaves a trail.